Hey, good morning. I'm Jamey from Stonemaier Games, and I am really happy to be here with you today on November 12th? November 12th. Yeah, this is a particular week for birthdays for me. Not for my birthday, but I have my best friend in the world, Trevor. His birthday is today, so happy birthday to Trevor. And my good friend Bryce, his birthday is tomorrow. And my dad's birthday, my dad, who unfortunately passed away from cancer a few years ago, his birthday is tomorrow. So I'm kind of celebrating all these wonderful people, some of whom are still in my life, some of whom are with me in different ways, like my dad this week in this second week of November. So I hope you're doing well. If you have any birthdays this week, feel free to celebrate them on today's live cast. I see a question right before I went live from Bogota JVM. Congratulations on a successful year. You mentioned before that Origin Story was rebooted, but not sure if you ever mentioned what kind of game it was and what did you find that it was lacking. Origin Story was originally a game, a game of custom dice. So you were like rolling dice to create your hero, a little bit in the vein of Role Player. Role Player, one of my favorite games. We just couldn't get it to work without like directly copying Role Player for the Origin Story format. And by the way, I'll put this out there. I've told Keith this at Thunderworks Games. I would play a superhero version of Role Player. If you ever want to put that out, I would buy and play that in a second because I love Role Player, and I think it could. I don't know. I think it could fit other formats as well with some unique tweaks to make it work. We were trying to do it with custom dice instead of numerical dice like you find in Role Player. Chad, looks like Chad had a birthday last week. Happy birthday to Chad. I am wearing today, if anyone notices this or knows. There we go. Hopefully it's working again. I think I tweeted. I won't move again this time. I'll just move myself instead of moving the mic. But I have a Decision Space podcast shirt on today. One of my favorite podcasts happens to be run by some of my friends as well, Paul and Pete and Jake. So thank you to all three of them and for making this amazing podcast and this amazing shirt, which I have now. You can buy this from the Decision Space website. Thank you, Austin, for confirming that you can actually hear me now. Yeah, it's a little fiddly on the microphone here. Aaron's birthday is coming up as well. George said, how am I doing? I'm doing well. I'll talk about some things related to how I'm doing in a moment. And Edward had a birthday last week. He played Castle Combos and Harmonies. Lots of birthdays this week. Jason adopted a lovely puppy. That's wonderful. Congratulations on the puppy. Hopefully I'm fully coherent today, but I drove 15 hours yesterday. I drove back from Virginia after driving to Virginia last Thursday and Friday. We were planning on flying, but our flights coincided exactly with when, due to the government shutdown in the US, that a bunch of flights were starting to be canceled just by default. I don't know if it's continued, but at least on Friday, 4% of flights were canceled. And I think it was supposed to go up by 1% every day. So we got kind of scared off from flying, even though our flights specifically weren't canceled. We were worried that maybe there would just be chaos at the airport. So I've driven home to Virginia in the past. I grew up in Virginia. My mom's there. My brother and sister and their families are there. So Megan and I drove to Virginia on Thursday and did a little bit on Friday. We didn't quite get there on actually, no, Friday, Thursday? No, we drove on Friday, got there on Saturday, spent most of Saturday, all of Sunday, all of Monday in Virginia with my family. And so I have some photos that I'm going to show you on my other screen today that'll show up on your screen in a few minutes about this trip, some of the highlights of the trip, some of the games we played, some of the things we did. I'll share that in a few minutes. I do want to mention as well that today is a newsletter day. So I'll briefly go over the newsletter. There wasn't any big news at all in the newsletter. It's mostly just a newsletter in gratitude of you. But maybe we can look at the progress chart and things like that in a few minutes. Yeah, so that's the Virginia topic today and the newsletter topic. And I'm going to give a few shout outs throughout the live cast to our new birds, our all new birds that are finding their way into Wingspan through these promo packs. Looks like Garrett says Allie's sister Lindsay's birthday is this weekend, and her Stonemaier connection is that she is one of Allie's reliable playtesters. Garrett, Allie, and Lindsay. Lindsay's new to me, but I know these are wonderful playtesters who have had a great positive impact on all of our games. So thank you. Happy birthday to Lindsay. Austin says that he lives in Southwest Virginia, so his drive to St. Louis was thankfully quite a bit shorter. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that, Austin. Yeah, it is quite a drive. And I have an electric car, so we have to plug in and stop throughout the drive. It makes it a full 15-hour drive. But you know, we got it done. We got it done safely. I'm a little worried, more worried than in the past. Maybe I'm just more paranoid about deer on the roads. I really don't want to hit a deer, both for the sake of the deer and myself and anyone around me. And there are quite a few deer on this stretch, from dead deer, unfortunately, and some living ones. We saw some living deer that fortunately weren't going into the road. But it's a little scary at night in particular. But even during the day, like a deer can come out all of a sudden on the highways. So just always looking out for that when I drive. So why don't we look at the kind of slideshow I put together here of sorts, so you can see what I was up to this past weekend. Let's see if this will work. No, I'll make it bigger. No, I want to be small. There we go. So this past weekend, this starts last Wednesday. I started this last Wednesday at game night. I taught and played Origin Story, our new trick-taking game. This is a hand of cards in which I played the Bravado card, which has you play your playing cards face up. All players at the table can see those cards face up. So I had a good time teaching and playing Origin Story at game night last week. Chocolate of the day today is brought to you by Corel in Belgium. Corel has helped in many ways at Stonemaier Games, including Rolling Realms. He's done graphic design for us, and he helped out in a big way at Essen Spiel. And Corel, over the last few years, has been very kind to bring us or send home Belgian chocolate. And so I am currently eating through this delicious box, truly delicious box of Belgian chocolate, including these pralines that are superb. They're so good. Like, even as I'm talking about this, I'm like salivating because I want to eat some more of these chocolates. So thank you, Corel, for sending these. I'll do a few slides and then I'll pop over to questions in a minute. Feel free to ask questions while talking. This is my family. I guess I'm taking the photo, so I'm not in the photo, but we were in Virginia and we played disc golf. This is my brother here. This is my brother-in-law, Joel, and Joel's gotten really into disc golf, so he had access to this special course in Richmond where we played. And one of the baskets is along this old railroad. It's not currently in use. This is the tee for the basket. These are some of my nephews. My mom here, Megan here, my sister Emily here. Megan's over here on the right. We played a really fun round on a beautiful fall day of disc golf in Virginia. My brother, who's actually in the background here, here's Andrew. Andrew celebrated his 40th birthday while we were in Virginia. Speaking of birthdays, his birthday was a little bit earlier in October, but he's celebrating. He had a big party at a space that he rented out with two other friends who also are celebrating their 40th birthdays. And so Megan and I joined them. We were pretty tired from the drive, so we didn't stay out too late for the karaoke portion of the party, but we had a good time meeting some of Andrew's friends and just celebrating Andrew's birthday with him. And yeah, I'll do a few photos here. That'll pop back to questions. But we went to one of my favorite things to do when I go back home to Richmond is to visit the Unplugged Game Cafe in Midlothian, Virginia. And so I went there. We had a table for 10. My brother and sister each have 3 kids. It's a pretty big family. And so we played a big game of That's Not a Hat, which is very difficult at that player count. I then taught them Bonanza, which actually went over pretty well. It's a little tough to trade down a really long table, but it worked pretty well. This trading game about planting fields of beans and collecting sets of beans. And then we broke into 2 smaller tables and played 2 5-player games. Megan taught Mlem to one side of the table, and I taught Sushi Roll, which you can see here, to the other side of the table. This was all at Unplugged Game Cafe in Midlothian, Virginia. I have some other slides to show, but I'll pop over to questions real quick. Nate says, are there any obvious incompatibilities with playing just the 6 Wingspan promo packs and the duet 2-player mode? No, there aren't. It's a good fair question, but no, really, these packs are balanced as closely as we could to the different mechanisms in the expansions for Wingspan, the core game, to the bonus cards, to the goals, to things like that. So no, you really can play these in any combination with other things for Wingspan that you already have. And that's why it really is okay. You don't need to buy all 6 of these packs. You could just buy a couple of them and give them a try and see if you like them. That is a totally viable way to play with these packs. Aaron echoes the concern about having a lot of deer near you when you're driving, especially at night. And I'm glad your aunt is okay. I'm sorry that her car and the deer weren't okay from that accident, Aaron. Wendy got to play Origin Story at their local game store. Played it last week and had a great time. I was way behind in rounds 1 through 4, but my cards comboed so well with my round 5 Vesuvius, that's the superhero card, that I pulled out the win by 2 points. That's awesome, Wendy. Yeah, we tried to make that final round balanced with the rest of the game, but also feel like a really powerful moment in the game with that superhero reveal, and your tableau is full at that point, so you can really go off with some fun combos. Congrats on the win there. Kevin said, did you happen to see the Northern Lights last night? So I was driving last night, and there actually was a moment last night, Kevin, where I was like, is that something in the sky? But I'd been driving for like 14 hours by the time it was getting dark, so I wasn't exactly sure what I was seeing in the sky. So maybe I saw something, but it wasn't really clear. Did you see them? What did you see, Kevin? What colors were they, and where were you when you saw them last night? And what time? I'm curious. Austin played Origin Story with his parents last week, and he has a new favorite called Monologuing. Yeah, that's similar to the Bravado card that I showed a second ago. Monologuing, he says, I role-played it. You think you can defeat me even with my cards are on the table? It is kind of a show of bravado. That's why the other card is called Bravado when you do the monologuing. Rick says, are my siblings adopted too? They are not. No. My parents weren't sure if they could have kids because my dad had a lot of cancer in his life, unfortunately, but he had a really aggressive form of cancer when he was 21. He was in college, and he kind of got blasted with not radio waves, but radiation at the time to help defeat the cancer. And that led to, I think, some of the cancers that he experienced later in his life and eventually passed away from. But anyway, they thought that they couldn't have kids. They adopted me. I was a little 3-year-old baby, a 3-day-year-old baby when they adopted me. But then my mom got pregnant. And so my sister is actually less than a year younger than me because they got pregnant. My mom got pregnant right after, just a few months after I was born. And then my brother came along a few years later. Rob says, do you have any plans to add more player versus player into new games? I really like Scythe and own most other Stonemaier titles as well, but I miss that player interaction, talking about like conflict-driven player interaction, especially having the ability to attempt to knock down a runaway leader. Rob, I must say you're not speaking my language exactly here, but I understand that there is a desire for this in games in general. In our games, there is a lot of player interaction. Some of it is positive. Some of it is just how paying attention to other players can benefit your play, or how something that they're taking from the middle of the table influences what you can or cannot take from the table. So our games have a lot of player interaction. It does sound like, from what you're saying, you're looking for more direct conflict, ways to hurt other players in the game. And that in general just really isn't something that interests me as a designer. Our games do have conflict. Libertalia has a lot of conflict. You aren't directly picking on players, but you are directly picking on characters in Libertalia, for example. I can name some other games as well, but most of our games, Apiary, for example, is full of positive player interaction. Everything you do is impacting what other players do, and everything they do impacts the decisions that you make in the game. But specifically for combat, we don't have a lot of that in our games. It is possible there will be some of it in the future, but if you're looking for games that really focus on hurting other players, Stonemaier Games is never going to be the place to find that, unfortunately. Or fortunately for me, maybe unfortunately for you. Fairly Odd Parent says, do you have a video for Mlem? Mlem is a game about cats in space, a push your luck game. And I do have a video about Mlem on our YouTube channel. Although there's a game that I played that I'll show in a second that I played a long time ago. I haven't played it in a while, and played it this past weekend, that I realized I don't have a video about. That game is Spyfall. I don't think I have a video about that one. So let's pop back over to the slideshow real quick so I can show you some of those things. So we're picking up where I left off at the Game Cafe. This is at Unplugged, where I taught sushi roll to some of my family members. This is, oh, you can't see the little one here. This is my mom, and these are my brother's kids. And right here, you really blocked by one of my nephews, is my little niece, Nellie. She's the newest in the family, and she is really adorable. So I'm sorry I didn't get a good photo of her. But this is at my brother's house in Virginia. This is Spyfall, the game I was just talking about. Hadn't played this in years. Maybe I played this before I had a YouTube channel, but I'll do a video on it soon. We had a great time playing this game. This is a game where every player except for one knows where everyone is. So everyone's at a location, and you're asking questions to other players to figure out if they are the spy who doesn't know where they are, without giving away the location, because even if you identify the spy as a group, if the spy correctly identifies the location, they win. I also played some Patchwork with my nephew. This is my nephew, Aaron, over here. He's, I believe, 7 years old at this point, maybe 6 or 7. He's a little kid, but he's really good at Patchwork. And this is the first time, I think, in a couple of years that I've actually beaten him at Patchwork in this particular game, because he is really sharp at it. And so we were talking a little bit about what games we could use to level up Aaron. Like, what's the next step after Patchwork if he does really like these polyomino pieces? I was thinking like My City could be good. Planet Unknown, I think, is wonderful. Maybe a little bit too heavy for him at this point, but we almost brought that out at the Game Cafe when we were there. Papa Patzer says, some bands get tired of people requesting their hit songs and want to play their lesser known songs. Do you ever get tired of people talking to you about certain games that you've made instead of others? That's a fair question. I can understand that about bands, but no, I do not get tired of talking about any of our games. In fact, I love when people bring up games from the past, like Viticulture. We still reprint Viticulture on an ongoing basis, and I still send out review copies. I think it's still a wonderful game that I want people to discover. So I love when people ask me about our games. I love when people ask me to play our games. I enjoy that too. David says, is there any connection between encounter cards in Scythe and Vantage? There was a little bit of an inspiration there between the two. The idea of looking at an image, and in Vantage, it's much more about using your eyes. Like, you really have to look at what's in the image. In Scythe, there's no information that you can't get from the text on the card. The image is just there because it looks pretty and kind of puts you in the atmosphere. David says, as in, did the encounter cards emerge from an early prototype form of Vantage, or did ideas for Vantage come from them? The encounter cards definitely came first. I designed Scythe back in 2014. I didn't start designing Vantage until 2017. But they did have a bit of an influence on me. In fact, the encounter cards, I consistently hear that people really love the encounter cards in Scythe. And so Vantage, one of the selling points in Vantage in a way, is that it is a game of 800 encounter cards. And so I think that's kind of a neat connection. For those who like Scythe and like the encounter cards in Scythe, you have a pretty good chance, I think, of liking that element in Vantage as well. Garrett says that he saw photos of the Northern Lights as well in Annapolis. And one little tip, I guess, that I found visiting Alaska is that while your eyes are pretty good at seeing, things in the sky, for some reason, if you look at the Northern Lights, if you're trying to look at it, if you look through your phone's camera, if you just turn on your camera and look through that, it can actually pick up the light better than our eyes can, in my opinion, and can help you see it, in case anyone's trying to look for it tonight. Here's Kevin talking about them in West Central Indiana. It wasn't quite dark when we were in West Central Indiana. We were in Illinois when it got dark on our drive back last night. Actually, and by 10 p.m., we were in bed. I was very tired after the long drive yesterday. Mitch started learning Origin Story. Awesome, Mitch. I hope that's going well. I hope you have fun playing it when you get the chance to table it. Aaron says, it's funny, I avoided Scythe for the longest time because I assumed it was a much more confrontational game than it is. And yeah, Aaron, you're right. While there is the ability to attack players in Scythe, it is not really a game about combat. There's combat in the game, but it's not really about the combat. It's more about avoiding combat than anything else. But I guess those who enjoy the combat part, they can lean into it if they want. Feast for Odin is another polyomino game that my nephew, Aaron, might enjoy someday. Maybe a little bit too soon for that, though. Let's see. Papa Pastor says, I have a 5-day board game retreat coming up, which sounds awesome. We need 6-player games between 2.5 and 3 on BGG. Libertalia and Viticulture on the short list. Any other recommendations? I mean, a lot of Stonemaier games play at 6 players. I probably have a video about higher player counts. Yeah, if you look on our YouTube channel for higher player counts, I'm sure you'll see a few videos on that. But at that weight, we look at our own games to see what 6-player games on our list fall into that weight. Between Two Castles is maybe getting close to that weight. It does scale well up to 7 players. Euphoria, I think, is right around that weight. And Euphoria actually plays really well at higher player counts. Libertalia, I like that pick. Red Rising does play up to 6 and is in that weight class. I'm hesitating a little bit because it works well at 6. There's just a little bit more downtime between turns if you play up to 6 in Red Rising. Rolling Realms is probably a little bit lighter than that weight scale, but does play up to 6 really well. Viticulture, you mentioned that one. Vantage also plays up to 6. Most of our games play up to either 5 or 6. That's our goal when we publish games. Demetrius says that they're a Euro player at heart, but he gambled on Vantage because Breath of the Wild is my favorite video game. Even his cat is named Zelda. After 2 trips, this is just going to be a very nice post. I was looking for a question, but Demetrius, this is very kind of you. After 2 trips on the magical world you crafted, I can say I have a long time since I felt this type of excitement to play something again. Thank you for your 8 years of hard work. I really appreciate it. That I have a whole planet to explore and my Calyx waiting for me. That makes my day to read that, Demetrius. That was exactly what I was going for. I wanted to give people a whole planet to explore and discover over many, many games. And I'm so glad that you're having fun with it after your first 2 plays. Even despite being a Euro game at heart, I play mostly Euro games myself, but Vantage has a very special place on my shelf and on my table as well. I almost brought it home to Virginia to play that as well. But I didn't know, with that many little kids running around, if anyone would really have the time or patience to play a little bit of a longer game like Vantage. Although the nice thing about Vantage is you can just say, we're going to play for 30 minutes. We're going to play for 45 minutes. You can set the time, and that is your adventure if you want to play just for that amount of time. Edward mentions cartographers as the next step up. I think that could probably work for a 6 or 7-year-old. There is, because at that time, they're probably drawing. Maybe they're not writing all that well, but they are drawing, and you don't really have to write in cartographers. You're just drawing. I love cartographers. Greg says, speaking of viticulture, Monique and Naveen, they're at Before You Play. Before You Play? I think that's right. Just put out a lovely playthrough video of viticulture with the Tuscany Essential Edition. And maybe we want to get it back to the table soon. That's great. Yeah, that's why we did this year of sponsored playthrough videos to kind of remind people of how much fun, that's very subjective, but how much we love our older games, and we want to invite people to rediscover them or get those games off their shelf and back on the table if they want. Before You Play. Okay, there we go. Rick mentioned that as well. Copenhagen, that's a good pick for a good polyomino game for younger players. A next step up after Patchwork. Indian Summer. Wendy, it's been a while since I played Indian Summer, but I did enjoy it. It's a really beautiful game in that same line of games. Grayson also mentions up in Canada that the Northern Lights were visible as well. Rob says, any more expansions for Scythe planned, or is it finished? So we finished Scythe a while ago, but we continued the world of Scythe through Expeditions. Expeditions is the sequel to Scythe. And if you like combat, while it isn't against other players again, Rob, there is, in the expansion, the first expansion to Expeditions, there is a combat against an autonomous corrupted mech that's kind of stomps around the map. So if you like Scythe and you want combat, it isn't between players, but there is a form of combat against this corrupted mech in the Expeditions expansion, Gears of Corruption, which is already available. That's already out there. Oh, Aaron mentions another way that you can speed up a game advantage, other than just setting a specific time or performing the actions on the mission, which you're welcome to do at any time when you play Vantage, but also just to take big swings, to try hard things. You might lose quickly, but can lead to some pretty memorable adventures, even when you do lose quickly. I think that's one of the wonderful things about cooperative games. Barron Park, Melissa mentions that as a good step up. Isle of Cats, Isle of Cats and Planet Unknown. We asked Melissa, we asked my little nephew, we said, are you more excited about planets or cats? And he picked planets, and that's why I had Planet Unknown in my mind. But I agree, Isle of Cats is a wonderful game for various ages. Okay, let me do one more question, and then I'll finish up my little slideshow over here. Chad says, for game design, do you ever feel burnt out on some mechanisms? You seem to focus on worker placement at the beginning of your career. Euphoria, Viticulture, Charterstone. Are you focused on different mechanisms, or what is fun at the time? That is a good question. I think it isn't as much burnout as it is I like a challenge. I like to do different things. I don't want to do the same thing that I've done in the past. Not that the worker placement is the same in Charterstone or Expedition or Euphoria or Libertalia. Viticulture. I'm a little short on sleep today, but yeah, I don't want to do the same thing. I like to challenge myself in different ways. That's the main reason, I would say. Miles, there you go. Miles says Isle of Cats family mode is really good. I don't think I've ever actually played the family mode of Isle of Cats. I always play the full, the advanced mode, whatever the normal mode is. But that would have been a good one to introduce to my little nephew. Darren says he finally got Tokaido Duo to the table, one of our new fall releases. Darren says, I won on the tiebreaker. I love the drafting dice, and at times having to hate draft one to stop the other player. There's another one, Rob. Rob, you're looking for direct player interaction. In Tokaido Duo, there is a really tight dice draft every round. Yes, you aren't hurting the other player, but you are taking something away from that other player that they can't do. And ideally, and mostly often, you're doing it because you really want to do that thing, not because you want to take it away from them. But I love that interaction in Tokaido Duo. And Darren, I'm glad you're having fun with that. Rob says, I hesitated on Vantage, but I'm glad I purchased it. I'm glad to hear that, Rob. I have about 10 plays, and it feels great with 2 players. But when I tried 5, it's hard to keep people engaged between turns. Do you have any advice on how to overcome that? That's a good question. By the design of the game is that players are heavily incentivized to share what they're seeing, to talk through out loud their options, because other players, that's really helpful information for other players to hear and use. And in addition to that, there's a lot of ways that you can help other players when it's not your turn. If they need help with placing a die on an impact die slot, if they have skill tokens that they can help you reduce the cost of your actions. So there's a lot of ways for players to help each other mechanically, but also in terms of the accumulated knowledge of the group. So if you have a group if you're trying to play at a larger player count and players are struggling a little bit, I would maybe remind them of those 2 things and maybe play by example, instead of maybe just quietly looking at the card and saying, I'm going to do this action. To talk through it a little bit, to talk about what you can see, read the description out loud on the card, maybe read the actions out loud on the card, instead of just to show players the options that you're seeing, because it might impact some of the options that they see on their side of the world in a few minutes. Yeah, that's my initial startup. If anyone else has any advice about engaging players at higher player count games of Vantage, feel free to share it here. Robin says, I asked you a month ago about a restock for European sellers of Tuscany. You said it would be on the way. Still not seeing it on the shelves, and stores say they don't know, but that they've ordered it. Any news on your end? Robin, at that time, let's see, I think I emailed my coworker, Joe, about Tuscany in Europe. Let's see what's going on there. Okay, yeah, Joe says that we have 500 Tuscany in stock in Europe. Okay. Yeah, I see this email conversation here. So Robin, Tuscany, unless I'm incorrect here, and I'll pull up our web store, Tuscany, I believe, is in stock in Europe. I'll search right now. Yes, Tuscany is very much in stock in Europe right now and has been. We wondered in that email conversation if you were actually talking about the core game, which is viticulture. If you're asking if viticulture is in stock, and viticulture currently is sold out on our web store in Europe. And Joe sent copies there, but it is a little odd they haven't been restocked. So I will email Joe after this, because this conversation happened on September 24th. This was on a Livecast day. And by now they should have arrived. Sometimes with those restock shipments from the US, we don't get a notification when they arrive, and so we don't know to add it back to our inventory on our web store. But hopefully we can get better at that, or our fulfillment centers can get better at that. Let us know when they receive a package like that so we can put it on an inventory. So most likely they have arrived and they just haven't been put back in inventory. But make sure, just in case, to still sign up for that back in stock notification, because that's the only way you can really guarantee that when we put it back in stock, that you get a notification right away when we do. As for a larger reprint of viticulture, I believe, have one planned right now, one that is in the works. I will check on that. Let's see if we do have one in the works. Yes, One is in the works for like a full reprint that we'll send to fulfillment centers around the world. That's due to arrive in March. But we should have a smaller restock from the US happening much sooner than that. Okay, let's cut over to the slides real quick. I'll be back for more questions. I love the questions. I appreciate that. So after my trip home to Virginia, we visited Trader Joe's. If you listen to the Positively Board Game podcast, you know that Mitchell often brings up treats of the day from Trader Joe's. We visited, not that, like we have Trader Joe's in St. Louis, but we were near one because my favorite ice cream in the world is a place called Gelati Celeste. And there is a Gelati Celeste in Richmond that is right next to Trader Joe's. So we went to both. Here's me, my brother, my mom, and my sister. There's Emily, Margot, Andrew, and me, Jamey, at my mom's house. This is me teaching my mom how to play Smitten 2, our little cooperative micro game. So we were trying to complete two panoramic grids of cards. And we failed a few times, but we succeeded on easy mode the last time we played, which was really satisfying. And here is Megan and I on our drive back from Virginia to St. Louis yesterday. We stopped to charge up at a few different places, including, actually, I meant for this photo to be something else. This was at a Big Boy, which I'd never been to before. But we stopped also at Tudor's Biscuit World, which I've driven past this place so many times in West Virginia. There's a place called Tudor's Biscuit World in West Virginia. And I've never stopped there before. We stopped there this time, and their biscuits were actually pretty good. Not many vegetarian options, but good biscuits. And this is me early in the drive, early morning hair for Jamey here. But if you look behind me, can you see this dog? This dog was just sitting in a car waiting for his owners to get out of breakfast, I guess, at the hotel that they were staying at. And it just, I can't get enough. I know I keep zooming on my own face, but this dog is in the driver's seat for reasons, I guess. Oh, and this is when we got home. Walter was very talkative and very cuddly after we finally got home after being away for a few days. Had a lot of things to say, and he was purring so loudly here in this photo when I took this photo. Anyway, that is most of my trip home. I didn't have a photo. We went to like an eco store. I thought this was really cool, actually. We've converted almost entirely for any what's the word? Disposable product, like soaps, for like hand soap and shampoo and bath soap. We've tried to move away from using any plastics in any of those things. So we don't get shampoo out of a plastic bottle. We get powdered soap, our dish detergent, our laundry detergent. We're trying to avoid plastics there. And I went to a store that is essentially like a refill type store, that they have all these types of things that don't use plastics, where you can just go to the store and refill your hand soap or refill your detergent, all without using any plastics. And it was really inspiring for me to be there. I thought it was really cool that they had this, because usually we order these things online, and I'd like to avoid that extra shipping because that's not good for the environment either. But it was really inspiring. It got me to want to revisit the conversation again about shrink wrap on our games, because it is a huge source of disposable plastic that we have on all of our games. I know they protect the games, but that's plastic that we've created from fossil fuels, and it's going to sit around in the environment and slowly dissolve into microplastics, which aren't good either, over hundreds of years. So I'd love to do better getting rid of more shrink wrap externally. We already do a pretty good job about getting rid of it internally. Most of our cards now are paper wrapped instead of in plastic. Yeah, here's Miles. He says, did you end up yeah, Miles, we did end up driving back to Virginia. Did you? Okay, Miles was going to a different city over the weekend. And Miles, I'm really glad that you had no issues. We were flying from St. Louis to Nashville to Richmond. We can't fly directly to Richmond, as far as I know. And St. Louis and Nashville and Richmond all seemed fine, but we didn't know if there would be any like spillover effects from other cancellations that would make it not as fine. And on the way home, we were flying through Chicago, which is an airport that is not as fine. There are a bunch of cancellations there. So we were a little more concerned about that. Edward says, were there any games from Design Day that you have your eyes on as potential signing? There were certainly a few games that caught my eye, not like instant, like, oh, I got to publish this right away, but where I want to continue to learn a little bit more about them. One of them, actually, I'll give him credit. Austin's right here. Austin had a really clever game that used time and clocks as a mechanism. I'm not 100% sure if it is the best fit for Stonemaier Games, but I thought it looked really cool, and I want to see how it evolves over time. So, Austin, I hope you keep me in the loop about your game. There's another game from, well, I won't say who's it from, but there was another game that that could be a fit for our like large group, light, short social game. Still thinking about that one. And there was one other game that intrigued me that I need to learn a little bit more about as well. Austin says, not everyone's into it, but I found doing some character roleplay is fun to keep things engaging and Vantage at high player counts, getting on the comms and communicating in character. Yeah, that's cool, Austin. Yeah, I must say, I don't always get into character when I play, but I do like to talk a lot and listen a lot when I play cooperative games. Okay, so Robin, you are talking about the expansions. I am talking about our web store in Europe, our Europe web store. But given how many copies we have in stock on our web store, I can't imagine that retailers can't also get it in stock in Europe. So I will ask our retailer and distribution team what's going on there. And Robin, if you have a specific store you want to mention, you don't have to mention it publicly. If you want to email me at jamey@stonemaier.com to let me know, because any store, if we have that many copies in stock, I think Joe said we had like 500 copies in stock on our web store. If we have that many copies in stock of Tuscany, it should mean that it's easily available for any retailer or distributor in Europe as well. But I will ask our team about that after I get off. Joe is responding from the fulfillment perspective about Tuscany right now. But if you want it and you've been waiting for it, it is definitely in on our European web store in stock in Europe, at our fulfillment center in Europe. Rick, for that Vantage question, large group, he says, I like to give each player a storybook. Oh yeah, that's in the rule book, but that's a good point to echo, Rick, that everyone has their own storybook, especially at the higher player counts. They all take turns reading for other players. Chad says a good way to get everyone engaged is to give them something to do, give them some books to read. Yes, similar to what Rick said. Papa Pastor says, do you have a shelf of shame? You know, I call it a shelf of opportunity, and I'm serious about that. I don't like the term shelf of shame because I think there's no shame in playing something that you already know or already love rather than something that you don't know if you are ready to play yet. So shelf of opportunity, I do have a shelf of opportunity. I keep it very slim, though. I often get games to the table for the first time. And so I think there's only like 3 or 4 games on it right now. And yeah, the 3 or 4 games that I own that I haven't played. Same answer there. Dean says, we've mostly played with 4, but a couple times with 5. Just encourage everyone to interact with everyone on their turn. I will admit it works better if you're playing with your friends who enjoy each other's company. It does help that. Yeah, that does always help, rather than strangers, for example. Rob also mentions the explore and draw version of Isle of Catch, which I haven't played. I've only played the full polyomino tile version. Rick says, was the decision to sign on other designers under the Stonemaier Games brand part of the company focus when you stepped away from Kickstarter, or something that happened circumstantially, people just reaching out? So I didn't realize that I wanted it to be a part of Stonemaier Games until there was a moment. Stonemaier Games for the first few years was a game about publishing the games that I had designed. And it still is. I still design games that Stonemaier Games publishes, like Origin Story, co-designed with Pete, and Vantage. But the key moment here, the key turning point, Stephen, was when I was at Gen Con in, I think, 2013. And that would have been my first Gen Con, I think. And Ben Rossett and Matthew O'Malley mentioned to me that they had a game that they were, I don't even know if they were shopping it at the time. They were kind of playtesting this game that ended up being called Between Two Cities. And they showed it to me there, and we played it. And I was like, wow, this is really cool. And I never would have thought of this. I had that moment, those 2 moments at the same time. I was like, you have created something really cool. I never would have designed this. I wouldn't have thought to do this, but it feels like it could be a Stonemaier game. This feels like something that I wish I had designed. And that was the moment when I realized, a moment of self-awareness, I guess, that I have a lot of limitations as a person, as a designer, as a publisher, not only in terms of what I'm able to design or design well, but also what I have time to design and design well. And that was the moment that I realized, okay, I want us to level up a little bit and be a publisher, not just of my own games, but of other games from other amazing, talented designers like Ben and Matthew. That was the turning point at that point in time. And we were still using Kickstarter. Between Two Cities. So this was during the Kickstarter days. We put Between Two Cities on Kickstarter in, I believe, 2014. And we still had some the Realistic Resources Kickstarters after that. We still had the Scythe Kickstarter after that. It was only after Scythe that we stopped doing Kickstarters. Rick says, I'm considering moving to the Richmond area. Can you speak to the gaming environment in that area? I don't know it all that well, to be honest, Rick, because I just go home for occasional visits once or twice a year. I do know that the game store that was there when I was a kid, One Eye Jocks in Carytown, is amazingly, is wonderfully still there. And the newer place that I go to is Unplugged Game Cafe in Midlothian, and that place is really cool. They seem to have a good community, working on a good community there at Unplugged Game Cafe in Midlothian. So I can't say much more than that, but I do think that those two stores seem to be doing pretty well, and Richmond itself seems to be doing pretty well as well. Like walking around, seeing the number of restaurants that were bustling, restaurants and bars and people out and about, especially in the Carytown fan area, was pretty cool. And the suburbs are nice too. I grew up in the suburbs, and they were really nice in Virginia. You all are talking about the dog that I showed you a second ago. Hilda says that her husband Sean and her have switched to using Kitsch products to avoid disposable plastics. What's the name of the store you just mentioned? I'd love to check it out. It was called so it was a one-off store in Richmond called Eco something. I'm forgetting that one. I know Megan buys from Blue Land a lot. That's a brand that you can order from. But the reason I think this name of the store might not be all that important, unless you're visiting Richmond, which is it's Eco something, and it's right next to Perk Cafe, is that when I asked, I mentioned the store, I was walking around loving this store, picking up things. We bought a lot of stuff at this store. And I said, I wish you were in St. Louis. I love your store. And her response was, oh, there's probably a store like that in St. Louis and you just don't know it yet. And so she searched for refill stores in St. Louis and found one in Kirkwood. She found like 3 in the St. Louis area by searching for refill stores, which might be a brand, it might be a franchise, or maybe it's just a type of store. But that's a way, if you want to get into this, to maybe look for those types of stores. This is from a very brief conversation I had, at this shop. Joe says, did you playtest any version of Origin Story that had more events happen? We did. Yeah, we debated how many events to have in the game, and we tried different versions of having more events. There was even a time where there were no events. And for us, having one event in the middle of the game was the right pick. But, Joe, if you like a really wacky game, you can certainly have more events throughout the game. You can add them, and you can even take away the event. If you want it to be less wacky, you could not play with the event in the middle round of Origin Story. Yeah, that's up to you. Background Noise X. I don't think I recognize you. Maybe a new commenter. Welcome to the livecast. What's your favorite civilizations to play in Tapestry that has quickly become my favorite game of all time? Well, I'm honored to hear that. Thank you for saying that. My favorite civilizations. I would say the civilizations that I've played the least are the ones that I am maybe the most excited to play next. And I think most of them are in Fantasies and Futures. That is the expansion that I mostly, I'm not the designer of that expansion at all. So I was the least involved in that expansion of any of the content in Tapestry. And so I don't know if I have a specific one of those, but those are the civs that I want to get to the table more often. And therefore, maybe not my favorite to play, but the ones that I want to play next. That's the closest I can get to, I think, to an answer about my favorite. Also, sometimes there's some civilizations in Tapestry that are easier than others. And if I'm teaching the game, I will often try to go with an easier civilization because my brain power is elsewhere in those games. I don't want a really complex puzzle when I'm teaching so that I can keep my focus on the other players and hopefully help them have fun. Mark says, in regards to eco-friendly components, what's your opinion on wooden dice versus plastic dice? I find plastic dice roll better and they are more fun. Would you opt for fun or eco-friendliness? Mark, this is a fantastic question. And this is where, for me, that I've tried to find that balance over the years between eco-friendly and offering the best possible experience for players. For a while, for example, in Vantage, the dice were wooden. They were wooden dice in Vantage, but they just didn't feel as good. They really didn't. And so I ended up switching over to the plastic dice. And I feel better about doing that than shrink wrap, much better, because shrink wrap, you dispose of it the minute you take it off the game. Whereas these plastic dice in Vantage, hopefully you will use them for many, many games over the years. It's still plastic. There's still the input of the fossil fuels to make that plastic, but the output is a little bit different. It probably is not going to be sitting in a landfill anytime soon. Hopefully not for Vantage. So yeah, certainly that is something I think about for Wingspan. For a while, we switched to a more expensive sugarcane pulp tray for the cards, but we consistently got feedback from people who thought that we were going cheap on these containers because they felt cheap. They looked cheaper than the fancy plastic version, even though they were actually more expensive. They were costing us more to make these. So eventually, honestly, a little part of it, I got a little tired of hearing that because it wasn't true. And so I switched back to the plastic versions. So it was a case where an eco-friendly decision was impacting the consumer experience. One that was a little debatable for me was Libertalia. In Libertalia, we use Bakelite, which is a form of plastic, for the tokens in Libertalia that you're drawing out of a bag, because it feels really good. Like the idea is from Azul. It feels really good to reach in that bag in Azul and pull out those heavy plastic pieces. But could we have gone with silk screen printed wooden tokens instead? Possibly, maybe, and it probably would have felt pretty close to as good as it feels currently in Libertalia. So that's one that I've debated a little bit, where I think it's a little more shaky. But it is something that I think about all the time, Mark. That's a fantastic question. Torres88 says, thanks for doing these streams. My pleasure. Thanks for hanging out on these streams. What was the question is, what was the original inspiration for doing content creation when it's not common with other people in your position in the board game world? P.S. Loving origin story. That's a great question. And I think it's started, it's kind of leveled up and layered up over the years. The first was back after Viticulture funded in 2012. I'll give the very short version of this. I'll give you a few examples of the layers. When Viticulture funded on Kickstarter in 2012, I wanted to offer some sort of value on an ongoing basis to people who wanted to pay attention to Stonemaier Games. And I didn't want to just like talk about our games or like show like photos of our games. Like I tried that a few times and I was like, why am I doing this? Like what are other people getting out of seeing yet another photo of a few visitor cards from Viticulture? So I started writing about my experiences on Kickstarter, the things I learned, the things I thought went well or didn't go well. And that turned into the full-fledged blog now that I write for Stonemaier Games. A few years later, I wanted an outlet to talk about game design, about game mechanisms. I love talking about game design, but I didn't want to review games because these are my peers. I don't like critiquing them. I like just sharing the things that I love. And I think, I think reviewers do a good job of that. But as a game designer, I want to be considerate of my fellow game designers. And so I started the YouTube channel around 8 years ago, just starting with individual little videos about my favorite mechanism. And I've continued that to this day. And then I think it was around 5 years ago, someone suggested, would you ever do a live stream? And at first I was like, no, I don't want to, like, I'm already doing videos. I'm already writing blog posts. Why would I do a live stream? But I have found that I really genuinely look forward to this every week. So I tried it and I was like, okay, I actually enjoy this. I think it's a great way to interact live with you, to answer your questions, to hear what is important to you in real time is a little bit different than commenting on a video or article after it's been published. So basically, it's just been layers upon layers of trying something for the first time because maybe someone suggested it or maybe it just felt right to me. And oftentimes sticking with it. I'm sure there are other examples of things that I tried where I was like, that just doesn't feel right. I'm not enjoying this. People don't seem to be enjoying this. And I stopped doing it. Actually, TikTok was one of those. I have hardly anything on TikTok at all, but I can't get into it as a user or as a creator. I can't get into TikTok. So I'm not going to force it. I have plenty of other ways to share fun stuff like that, like on Instagram. Jeff says, if I remember correctly, you had a question of the day from last week that you didn't get around to. Any new or old questions for the day? Thanks for asking about that, Jeff. I was thinking about that this morning. And the main... Okay, I do have kind of two questions. One was from last week, but I haven't written about it yet. Last week was about rule books. So if you have a favorite rule book that you think is just like the best rule book for learning a game, I am going to do a blog post on that very soon about that topic. So you don't have to say it now, but you could start to think about it if you want to. The other topic or question is that I posted a video the other day about a game called Gloomies that I've played. Gloomies is a game where you are planting flowers in the first half of the game and then picking up those flowers, plucking those flowers in the second half of the game. And so I'm maybe looking to do a video about games that are of two halves like that, where you're doing something very distinct in the first half of the game and then maybe undoing that or doing something very different in the second half of the game. And not like a curve of doing this, like in a deck building game where you kind of pivot towards points at a certain point of the game. I have a video about that already. I'm talking about a very distinct switch where you are almost playing a different game, even though it is connected to the original game, the first half game in the second half. Another example of this would be the game For Sale. So if you have any games that are of two halves, like Gloomies, like For Sale, like Amon Ra, if there's enough of those types of games, that I might do a top 10 video about them. That is my other question of the day. Oh, cool. So Rick has been to One Eyed Jacks. That's awesome. Yeah, that's the game store, a game store in Richmond, Virginia. Board Game Eric, yeah. So I was hoping to see Eric and Carrie, two people who have been wonderful supporters of Stonemaier Games. I was hoping to see them at Unplugged, but it didn't work out this past weekend. Eric also says that Battlegrounds is another game store just down the street from Unplugged. Oh, I didn't realize that. That's cool. Thank you, Eric, for chiming in about that. Monkey Butler says, I'm not suggesting anything nefarious, just curious. Are your designs for Stonemaier more or less greenlit by default as the major shareholder, or do even your designs go through an approval process? It's a great question, and they do. I don't know if I've blogged about this. Maybe I have, maybe not. But part of the process that I've added in the last couple of years is that when I am excited to kind of move to the next stage on a game design, so maybe I've gone past the brainstorming stage, maybe I've made a prototype, I will, but before I determine that, oh, okay, this is going to be a Stonemaier game, I'm going to pursue a full development of this game. I film a video pitch of that game, and I send it out to my coworkers, and I say, what do you think? Would you like me to continue to pursue this? Or are you really not into this? If you don't, or you don't think it's marketable, or you have major concerns, whatever it may be. And so I literally do pitch all of my own designs to my coworkers to see if they want me to continue with them or not. And that process of, I think that check and balance is really helpful, but also just the process of talking through what I am trying to make and what I've started to make is really helpful for me as a designer as well. Here's Melissa again from Tantrum House. Thank you, Melissa, for hanging out. She says, Kevin and I really enjoy Ben and Matt's games. That's like Ben Rossett, most recently known for the Game Makers. He published, he worked on Fromage. I think he was the designer of Fromage. And he's known for us for Between Two Castles, Between Two Cities. Anyway, Melissa says, every time we saw them at a convention, we asked if we could play test their current design. I remember being really excited about Between Two Castles of Mad King Ludwig. Now just Between Two Castles, Essential Edition is what we call it. So glad it was published. We play it fairly often when we have 5+ players. Yeah, I go back and forth between that and Cities. I like how snappy Cities is, but I also really like the idea of building a castle. In fact, just talking about that makes me want to get castles back to the table, because it is thematically, for me, really, really satisfying to build a castle. And I should say, Melissa, can I give a little shout out to your convention, to Tantrum Con? At Tantrum Con for the last few years, and including this coming year, we sponsor a kind of a learn and play lunch where you can learn how to play one of our games and play that game through lunch while eating. I love multitasking. And our game this year is Origin Story. So we'll have Origin Story at Tantrum Con this year. Melissa, I don't know if tickets are still available for either that event or for the convention, but I hope it's okay if I give it a shout out, because I think you all do a wonderful job from what I've seen and heard from that convention, and especially those lunches. Those you have a fun name for it, like Eat a Game or Game a Meal, something like that. I don't know if you know it, Melissa, if you can remind me the name of those events. Background Noise asked a question about Tapestry a few minutes ago. That's funny you say that about Fantasies and Futures. We recently got that expansion, and we are absolutely loving playing with those civilizations. Well, maybe you tell me, do you have one that you've played recently or over the last few months that you've really enjoyed in Fantasies and Futures that you think that I should play? Because maybe I'll try to get Tapestry to the table soon and get that specific expansion or that specific civ for myself, if you really recommend it. Rob says, is there any update on the Vantage errata pack being back in stock? So we're at the point with the update pack where I think we have a few more. We have like a small buffer supply that are on their way, but they'll take a few weeks to get here. So probably be December before they get here. But then we have also started the reprint process. So we're printing another batch of it. There's one sticker in that pack, sticker 61 for entry 1660. That is a little bit too big. So you just have to kind of be careful, really careful when you put it on. We fixed that in the reprinted version that will arrive in a few months. But we should have a small restock. Again, sign up for a back in stock notification. Always do that to let us know that you want us to make more and so that you get a notification when more back in stock. But there should be some back in stock in December. Michael says, I'm all for eco-friendly packaging, but some items are yuck. I recently organized my nesting box to add in the new bird packs, and the bag is basically torn, fell apart during this. Yeah, Michael, that is something that we experimented with. Like I've talked about today, some experiments, and it didn't work. You're right. We tried these compostable bags, and they just fell apart, or just sitting in the box. It doesn't get goop or anything on your components, but they kind of look like they were shredded almost. So we stopped using those. But if you some of those, like a lot of our games haven't changed in a couple of years now, so they're still in circulation. So you might go to a game store and pick up a copy of Wingspan that we actually printed a few years ago, and everything about the game is fine except those plastic bags. If you might find the compostable bags in there. Fortunately, I think there's an abundance of plastic bags in games in general that you don't really need them. You can just compost them or recycle them. But yeah, that's something that we learned from and moved away from. Trishul says he had a great first play of Wormspan last week. I was looking to see if I had Dragon Academy over here. I do. It's under a stack of games. During development, were there different interpretations of which costs are avoided during free play of Dragon and Cave cards? There were, and so we changed the language to what we thought would make it clear, because the key thing in Wormspan is that there's an action called Entice. And when you perform the Entice action, you have to pay a coin. There's also just a benefit called Play a Dragon card. That is different than Entice. It is connected to it because when you Entice, you are playing a Dragon card. But Play a Dragon card is a separate thing. It is not the same as Entice. And so that's why, Trishul, you may have encountered some language in there that say, like, play a dragon for free. And to us, that is very clear that we are not saying perform the Entice action for free. We are saying play a dragon for free. Similar to excavate for cave cards and play a cave card for free. So that is what we were thinking and how we evolved it a little bit while playtesting, thanks to playtest feedback about using the same term in different places or trying to use different terms to make it clear. Seven Castle says, love last week's podcast with Mitchell about house rules. How do you decide when to stop adding or changing rules before publishing? That's the playtesting process. That's kind of tied to what Trishul said a little bit, trying to playtest games over and over again, locally and with lots of feedback from people around the world, blind playtesters, to try to figure out when that is the right time. In general, I try to streamline rules, but then as questions come up, that's when I start to add back to the rules for clarification, so that everything can be covered in there. And we still miss things. We miss things that seem obvious to us and even obvious to playtesters, and no one ever asked about it. But that is why I think a lot of quality playtesting is really important. Quantity is important, but also really getting quality playtests from people who feel free to ask. I'm going to call them dumb questions, because dumb questions are the questions that make rulebooks clear. I really love playtesters that ask the questions that in the moment I think, can't you just figure that out? Because if they couldn't figure it out from the rules, it means it isn't clear in the rules. And that's my responsibility as a designer to go in and make it clear to add those rules. So again, yeah, so much of it comes from playtesting. Also, when are you coming to Ireland? We'd love to buy you a drink. Oh, that's so nice of you. I'm going to be in Ireland next year. Next year in 2026. Yeah, 2026 is when we are visiting Ireland. Let me know where you are there. And I'll let you know if we're coming through that area when we're there. Feel free to send me an email if you want at jamey@stonemaier.com in case you don't want to broadcast your location. And that way I can bookmark it about getting in touch if we are going through your area. I'm currently, like, we're going to a few big cities. We're going to Cork, we're going to Dublin, but I really want to spend a few days in a beautiful, cozy, small town. So if you have any recommendations for that, I'd love to hear them. LB Jeeper says, how niche or niche? What do you say? Niche? I'll say niche. How niche is too niche for a game? What is a viable market size for publishing a game? That's a good question. I would say I generally think about games in terms of minimum order quantity, which, if you're ordering at scale from someone like Panda, a manufacturer, is 1,000 units, but ideally 1,500 units. So that would be like the smallest quantity of game or product that I'd ever want to make. For most of our first print runs, we aim for 20 to 25,000 copies of our first print run of a new game. So we go into it thinking, if we can't sell 20,000 units of a new game, what does that say about the game? It doesn't mean that it's a bad game, but it just means that it isn't marketable enough, and it doesn't have that evergreen potential that we ideally want at Stonemaier Games because of the amount of work that we put into our games. We put so much work into creating it in the first place. We want people to enjoy it for many years afterwards. So that's both about size and also about replayability and things like that. But I say all that, but I also want to say that for the sake of designing a game, I think anything goes. Doesn't necessarily go for publishing a game, but if you design a game that you're really passionate about, that you really enjoy designing, that you enjoy playtesting and iterating, and maybe only 2 or 3 other people are really enjoying that game too, or even if it's a solo game, if only you are designing it, I think that's okay. That's okay. It doesn't have to be a published game in the end. It doesn't have to be a game for 1,000 people or 20,000 people. It can be a game just for you, and that's great too. I think that's wonderful. I almost wish more designs were like that. That we're okay with designing games that we don't end up publishing, because I don't think every game needs to be published, but it's okay to design any game, in my opinion. Torres88 says, what were the pros and cons of co-designing versus designing on your own? I generally prefer to design on my own, but it is helpful for certain designs, like, for example, for Origin Story. Pete was amazing for Origin Story because Pete knows trick-taking games so much better than I do. So kind of acknowledging where my expertise falls short and leaning into someone else's expertise, I think that is a great time to work with a co-designer and find an equitable way to divvy up the work. Austin mentions, thank you, Austin, for saying this, your game is now magnet-free. I actually really like magnets. I know they're probably not the best for the environment, but I would love to have a game with magnets at some point. But I'm glad that you found a way that makes the game better by removing the magnets. That's cool too. So here's some good rulebook suggestions. I won't read them out loud now, but I will look back at this video in the comments for that blog post about rulebooks if I end up doing that. Okay, and there are suggestions as well. Thank you for these about games with 2 distinct halves. I appreciate that. I am realizing as we get to the end here that I did not talk about our progress chart. So let me. I know we're a little bit over time here. Feel free to go do whatever you got to do. Totally understand that. But I'll spend like 2 minutes on the newsletter on my other screen here. I will pull this up. I need to remove that. Sorry about this. I don't know if I can present. Okay, I'll stop that. Oh, there we go. Okay, I will share this screen that has the newsletter on it. There we go. Okay, so really briefly here, newsletter today was mostly just a newsletter of gratitude. Just thanking you for an amazing year. I hope we've brought joy to your tabletop. I hope we continue to do it across November, December, and beyond. And I kind of just summed up all the things that we released this year in case you want to look back, get something to the table for the first time, or just, look at what we created this year. That's the main point. Here's some images of those things. I also featured our third-party accessory showcase, which you may have heard before, me talking about that on our livecast on the blog. These are products that are related to Stonemaier Games products, but they're unofficial. They're created by third-party creators. And we now have, I don't want to call it a marketplace, this is a showcase, because we're not selling them. We are just linking to the places where these things are sold in case any of them interest you. Like not that this shirt exactly applies, but this decision space shirt is kind of in the realm. You can see some t-shirts are here. You can always use our newsletter to get a kind of a consolidated version of all of our other little smaller newsletters if you don't want to subscribe to all of them. And last, let's look at the progress chart. We have the fan design bird packs, Crossroads, and Origin Story. Those, Origin Story, oh shoot, I meant to take that off. Origin Story should not have the word code name. Obviously, that is not the code name. I'll change that on our website. But those are the things that are now starting to become available at stores. I think the fan design bird packs, they won't be arriving at stores for a few more weeks, but it's close now. These are all on our web store available to order. And then coming up soon, our next two things in late January will be the two big expansions we have coming up, the new Wingspan expansion and the new Finspan expansion. Expeditions will be later in the year. And we have Namiji coming later in the year as well. But yeah, these are the two big things coming up. The Wingspan and the Finspan expansion are the other things coming up in the very near future in January. Armando says, what are some genres of games you haven't published that you have interest in publishing in the future? Some genres. Let's see, Armando. So we don't currently have a deck building or bag building game. And I am interested in publishing one of those, but I also know that we are publishing one of those. So I don't want to put that out there to say, go submit a deck building game to us. Not that we wouldn't consider it, but that is one that I've been wanting to have a board game with deck building as a mechanism. And we do have a game that will have that that's in the works right now. Beyond that, I don't even know. And even then, like, it isn't like I was specifically pursuing a deck building game. I just want to publish games that are awesome, that work with our guidelines, that bring joy to people, that feel like a Stonemaier game, it's tough to describe that. So I don't know if I have like very specific genres that I'm saying I really want a game in this genre. Other than the ongoing challenge that I have is that I would love to have the type of game that you can explain in like 3 rules on the back of a box that you can play with anybody, a light, short, social, probably cooperative game. That is something that I have a few good leads on, but I'm still looking for that. It is still a bit up there on our submission form on our website. So that is a genre of game that I am curious about. Tournameals. Tournameals is, I think, what it is. Did I miss Melissa actually clarifying that? Thank you, Melissa, for saying that. That is, I believe, the name of the showcase for the meal-driven showcase for games at Tantrum Con. Here we go. Here's Melissa. She says, tickets are available for the convention February 5th through the 8th in Charlotte, North Carolina, tantrumcon.com. The events are Tournameals. Even though I don't think Origin Story, is Origin Story actually a tournament, Melissa? Are there winners for that, or are you just kind of teaching and playing it during a meal? But yeah, it's a fun name. Tournameals, events open in January. Okay, here we go. Talking about Vantage today. The last game that Background Noise X played was with the Werefolk, and then ended up finishing the game as the Elder Ones. 2 awesome civs. Okay, so maybe I think I may have played the Werefolk at one point. They have like a tile flipping mechanism to determine whether it's like a moon or not, the full moon. I don't know if I've played as the Elder Ones in the final version of the game. During playtesting, probably. Oh, here's a neat play. Edward, thank you for recommending the Jameson Distillery in Cork. Very cool. The highlight of our trip a couple years ago. The Jameson tour is more about bottling rather than making. That's great to know, Edward. Thank you for letting me know about that, and I will add that to our Ireland list. I need to find the sheet for that. Okay, I'm a little over time here. Thank you for hanging out. Rob says, is there a bundle pack that contains all the fan promo packs? No, they're all available just individually like this. So you can buy a few of them. You can buy all of them if you want. There's no default bundle. You do save 20% on everything on our web store if you are a Stonemaier champion. And George says, would you not consider Expeditions a deck building game? I would consider it a hand crafting game. You're never shuffling your cards in Expedition. So it's a little bit more like, it really is the more Concordia style hand building, hand crafting game. I wouldn't call it deck building. It's adjacent to that, but not directly. Okay, Melissa points out tournaments are not actually tournaments. We randomly pick winners at each table to take home the game. It's not dependent on performance. And I love that. So it's kind of a hybrid between a teach and play, a meal, and and play and win. 3 of my favorite things. So that's awesome, Melissa. Thank you for clarifying and for running that. I think that'll bring us to the end today. Thank you for hanging out a little overtime with me today. And I hope you're doing well. Hope you maybe see the Northern Lights tonight. Now that's a thing. Thank you all for sharing that. And did I miss anything? I don't think I missed anything big. Oh, I wanted to mention that there is a new sumo tournament happening right now. If you want to get into sumo, check out Don Sumo on YouTube to see some of the top 10 fights bouts that are happening right now in sumo, in the world of sumo. Oh, and the book that I'm reading is Darkly. Hilda was here earlier. Hilda gave me a copy of Darkly, and I am really enjoying this book about Darkly. Maybe I'll talk about that in a future week because it is a fictional book that does talk about about game design a little bit and about publishing board games in an interesting way. Anyway, have a great day. Take care. I'll see you later. Bye.